Either way, I think we gotta walk the same trail.
I'm not so sure. He may have said that you just walk down.
You want another one?
No, thank you.
You gonna stay down there?
I'll do it for a moment.
All right. No, you're all right.
Well, good afternoon, folks. How are you all doing here today?
Doing wonderful.
Very good. Welcome you then to the Fort Mackinac cannon firing demonstration. My name is Sage. I'm joined here by Jack and by Ted. And we are the 3 soldiers who will be firing off this cannon for you all today. Before we step back to load and fire the cannon, we do want to tell you just a little bit about the soldiers that we're dressed to represent and a little bit about the cannon itself. Now, for starters, we are dressed to represent the soldiers of the 23rd Regiment of United States Infantry, Company A, that were stationed here at Fort Mackinac between 1884 and 1890. These soldiers are going to be up here for a rather unique purpose, as they are not here for any combat detail at this time, but instead they're serving as the caretakers for what was then Mackinac Island National Park. So these soldiers are up here for a rather peaceful posting, but they are still up here at a military posting. They still perform normal soldierly duties while they are also monitoring the national park, and with national parks come many tourists. So tourists just like yourselves came here to Mackinac Island in the 1880s to visit the park, but also to visit the fort and the soldiers themselves. The soldiers even went so far as to even invite those tourists inside the fort to watch them perform special ceremonies, which would include the firing of cannons. Now, when they are firing off those cannons, they fire what are known as salute shots. These are 10-ounce black powder charges with no cannonball inside. They are just to make a loud bang to celebrate something, and they had plenty of things to celebrate at Fort Mackinac, such as daily routines like the raising the flag in the morning or lowering the flag in the evening. They fire the cannon off for federal holidays like the 4th of July, where they fire off a 38-gun salute, celebrating 1 shot for each State of the Union, or they'll also fire off the cannons for Memorial Day. But they also fire off the cannons for grievous circumstances, like the passing away of former President Ulysses S. Grant in 1885, or joyous occasions, like the first boat of tourists come to the island after a long winter, or celebrating George Washington's birthday. Now, they had a total of 5 artillery pieces at Fort Mackinac for those salute shot purposes, and we have one of those types of artillery that would have been up here at Fort Mackinac to fire for you all today, this being the Model 1841 6-pound smoothbore field gun, or more commonly known by the soldiers as their 6-pound. Now, I assure you folks, that does not mean that the cannon itself weighs 6 pounds, but the name is referring to a part of the cannon that does weigh 6 pounds to warrant that nickname. And if anyone wants to guess as to what that part is going to be, feel free to shout it out. Any guesses? The ball, exactly, the cannonball. This cannon can fire a 6-pound cast iron cannonball at a maximum distance of 1 mile. This will be all the way out to the shores of Round Island out there. And at that mile-long distance, I can guarantee you all that the smallest target that we can hit that distance is going to be roughly the size of about Round Island out there. So, as you can see, it is not a very accurate cannon at that distance. That's because this is a smoothbore cannon. So that means there's no rifling or machined grooves that are carved inside the barrel of this piece to give the cannonball the essential spiral it needs to make it more accurate. The more effective range of the cannon is going to be limited to the half-mile mark, so that's just after the end of the stone brick wall out there. From that distance, you can reliably hit a ship-sized target, 1 set of every 3 shots. Now, this might be adequate defense for during the War of 1812, but by the 1880s, this type of artillery is horribly outdated. And the reason why is because the U.S. Army has developed much more modern artillery. That artillery is breech loading. They utilize modern shells. They have rifled barrels, and they're able to reach out and hit targets effectively at up to 5 miles away. So this old Civil War surplus cannon would still be used by the U.S. Army during the 1880s, but only for ceremonial purposes. And that's why they're sending these cannons up here to Fort Mackinac during this time, for just celebratory purposes. But now that you all are familiar with the cannon itself here, I'd say now is a good time we step back to load and fire this cannon in honor of you all coming to visit us here today at Fort Mackinac. How does that sound?
Woo!
folks, is the camera fire for you.
Hey!
Now, before we start loading the cannon, we do have to go through a couple of safety procedures before we can load in the cannon charge. Our last shot that we fired might have left some smoldering debris or embers in the base of the barrel. And if we put a live cannon charge to those embers, that can lead to an accidental discharge and would not be very good for our crew working in front of the cannon. So in order to get them out, we need to do what's called thumb stalling. So I'm going to take my thumb and cover this touch hole in the rear of the cannon. This will prevent any airflow going in to stoke up any sparks or embers. All the while, Jack is going to use the auger or the gunner's worm to remove any debris inside the barrel. But if he does find anything today, it will be some historically inaccurate aluminum foil. You see, we use aluminum foil to wrap our charges rather than the more historically accurate muslin cloth, because muslin cloth burns and smolders, and we do not want to send any smoldering debris down to Marquette Park, as we don't want to light a lilac bush or a tourist on fire. But the next tool we're going to be using here is what's called a wet swab. This is a piece of sheep's wool that Ben is going to be ramming down the barrel to douse some potential sparks or embers in water before we put in the charge of gunpowder. Now, normally in a combat scenario, this cannon will be crewed by 9 men. You'll be able to load and fire this cannon effectively at about 1 to 2 shots a minute. But this being a salute shot means that we don't need the full cannon crew here. Soldiers here at Fort Mackinac will be firing up these cannons as few as 2 men really during this time. But now that we have the cannon loaded, we are now ready to push the cannon forward and start to prime the cannon. So at this stage, Jack's going to take a brass spike called a gimlet and run it down the touch hole in the rear of the cannon. This will poke a hole into the cannon charge to reveal the gunpowder for our ignition device. That device we are using today is the same ignition device they used in the 1880s, which is what's called a friction primer. A small brass tube filled with very fine gunpowder. At the top there is a chemical called fulminate of mercury with a pin running through it. So the idea is that we're going to pull the pin and that will create friction in the fulminate of mercury, which will in turn create sparks, and those sparks light off the gunpowder inside the tube. That will send a small explosion down to the barrel, which will ignite the main cannon charge for us all today. And now that we are ready to go, it's also at this time I do have to remind you that this is a cannon. Most of the sound will go into the harbor, but it will still be quite loud. I do recommend that you either cover your ears or get out your cameras, whatever your priorities may be. And now there are only 2 commands left to fire the cannon. They are ready! Fire! Woo! And there you have it. Again, it's yeah! Thank you so much for attending the cannon firing demonstration. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them while we're cleaning the cannon.
That was quick.
That was a good timing.
All I said was bright light covering it, and everybody covered my head.
Next to the soldiers' barracks. So I do hope to see you there.